Press F for feminism, chaps, because gender studies is under attack all around the globe. Gender studies and gender equality and equality for LGBT people are threatening for authoritarian regimes, because authoritarian regimes require for somebody to have more power than someone else. Once you overthrow the idea that the patriarchy is something natural, for them that is the destruction of a kind of building block of culture. Well, that's correct. But the thing is, hierarchy is natural, and it's not innately authoritarian. It can be, of course, authoritarian, but not necessarily so. Hierarchy, or what they would call patriarchy, is, in fact, a very natural occurrence, and often, I would say, demanded by women. Like the fine ladies who are backing Bolsonaro and don't see any reason for feminism. The openly sexist presidential candidate has faced an extraordinary backlash. So why do so many women support him? Because women apparently love patriarchy, okay? They are the anti-feminist women backing the far-right former paratrooper Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil's upcoming presidential runoff election. This is an old article. A man who has been repeatedly accused of misogyny and racism. Really, was he accused of misogyny and racism by a radical leftist? Because that'd be new, wouldn't it? No one's ever been falsely accused of misogyny and racism by radical leftists before. This would be totally new. I really don't see any reason for feminism today. Men and women are equal in Brazil, said an oppressed woman. 56, a retired lawyer. Wow, I mean, just a housewife, basically. That bitch doesn't even know what she's talking about, does she? How dare she? These feminist women screaming and taking off their clothes, it's very backwards. Bolsonaro isn't taking any rights away from women. Wow, that's pretty fucking based and red-pilled, really, isn't it? Over the course of a 30-year political career, Bolsonaro has earned notoriety from his sexist remarks, once telling a fellow lawmaker she didn't even deserve being raped. My fucking spirit animal. And more recently saying that he wouldn't pay women the same salary as men. Well, I guess he can't, because they don't turn up to the office as often. They don't do as many hours in a week as the men do. He can't pay them the same, can he? In 2013, he called the Secretary of Women's Policy a big dyke. Probably true. During the impeachment of the country's first female president, he dedicated his vote to the dictatorship colonel who had only seen her torture. Holy shit. I swear to God, Bolsonaro is just my favourite absolute mad lad. So such language made him a hate figure for many, and yet he still won the presidency, didn't he? And he's making Brazil great again. And apparently the ladies love it. When Bolsonaro's supporters held their own demonstrations, his son Eduardo pronounced, "Right-wing women are prettier than left-wing women. They don't show the breasts on the street, nor do they defecate in the streets. Right-wing women are more hygienic." Well, that's demonstrably true, isn't it? Seems like radical feminist women are pretty fucking disgusting, and apparently have no problem with them being disgusting and naked in public. In one, a female Bolsonaro supporter stands surrounded by Brazilian flags, eyes closed, fist in the air, with a sleeping child over her shoulder. Now that's the important part, isn't it? The woman from the El Now protest is yelling, topless, daubed with body paint. Another widely shared image showed a little boy wearing a shirt saying, "Mum's a feminista, I don't grow up to be a machista," which I suppose is manly, with text written over it, "Sweetie, if your mum's a feminist, you wouldn't even have been born, you'd have been aborted." Whew, that's spicy. I'm loving the Brazilian anti-feminists. They don't pull their punches, do they? A real feminist is a woman who gets up early, works hard and fights for her independence, not these women who whine and have barely worked a day in their lives, says Linda Fontes, 23, a real estate administrator from Rio's poor periphery, who describes herself as a Bolsonaro fanatic. I bet she's a good-looking girl too. She's been mugged twice and supports Bolsonaro's loosening of gun laws so citizens can protect themselves from violent crime. Not surprising, really. If you've been mugged twice, you might want to carry some kind of defence, because Brazil is a massively crime-ridden country. I need to be able to protect myself in the chaos that is Rio de Janeiro today. Female Bolsonaro voters shrug off his refusal to support legislation to ensure equal pay, despite studies showing that women in Brazil earn 22.5% less than men. Yeah, and I bet they work about 22.5% less than men too. It's all adding up, isn't it? Salaries for both men and women should be based on merit and responsibilities. Women today are well aware of their rights, obligations and duties. We don't need the government for that, said Maria Alice de Lego, a seamstress from rural Sao Paulo state. She sounds amazing and totally fucking woke on the problems of modern feminism. These women are liberal, not progressive. How awesome is this? And I bet The Guardian was just seething having to publish this article. The ladies accept that Bolsonaro sometimes doesn't express himself well. Maybe his tones sometimes lack respect, but who am I to judge? Man, Brazilian women sound amazing. I've never played the victim card, says an unnamed black woman supporter in one such clip. I support the right. I'm feminine and I love it. I shave my armpits. I cook for my husband. Yes, I wash my husband's clothes. There's no problem with that. So women who know what they want and why they want it. Right, okay. That makes sense. So a professor from the University of Sao Paulo said, it was evident that Bolsonaro would have a problem with women. Really? But Bolsonaro and his internet base reacted. They adjusted the discourse to position him on the side of women, but against feminists, which was a risky strategy, but it worked. It's probably got something to do with the fact that even the feminists think that sexist men are sexier than woke men. What is it about toxic masculinity that's just so goddamn sexy, ladies? You're going to have to tell us once, you've done enough studies on it. Dating male feminists turned out to be one of the least empowering decisions I've ever made. Which is pretty amazing given how you'd expect that dating a male feminist would mean that you would have to do fucking everything. Take the lead in absolutely every walk, every way in your life. But I mean, I guess that the women who find sexist men at least not being traitors to other women. Oh, it sounds like they're supporting the patriarchy to me. I think they are. I think they are traitors to other women. I think that feminist women should only be allowed to date feminist men. I think we should have a rule about that. They are, in fact, women who recognise that it may be more beneficial to have a partner who is committed to them and willing to sacrifice for them and their family than it is to have a woke feminist man who wants them to be independent. Because women want children. That's what it comes down to. And why shouldn't they? Children are fucking great. Take it from someone who is a father. There is no better way of giving meaning to your life than having kids. But the uprising against feminism is worldwide. Apparently the Chinese government is ultra woke on the question of feminism and is trying to quash it within China. Russia is treating feminists as extremists and locking them the fuck up. The new far-right party that's been elected in Andalusia, a province of Spain, has a radical anti-feminist agenda. And Viktor Orban defunded gender studies in Hungarian universities on the grounds that it's ideology and not science. And all I'm saying is, feminists, you can't prove him wrong. It is ideology and not science. And that's literally how it was described in the very first article we covered. They are literally attacking the concept of hierarchy as being unnatural, and unfortunately for them that's not true. The science shows that hierarchies are natural. The idea of dismantling hierarchy is the ideological part. The idea that we can create a world that's non-hierarchical is fantastical, because we haven't seen such a world. There is nowhere on Earth, or has ever been anywhere on Earth, where human society has been non-hierarchical, making the idea conceptual, aka ideological, by definition. You cannot show a working example of a non-hierarchical human society. Such a thing is pure ideology and not reality. And even traditional feminists are opposed to gender studies at this point. As, like, for example here, Scottish feminist group says transgender laws risk women's rights. Yes, the TERFs, the radical man-hating feminists, hate the fact that men are trying to become women because, they're muscling in on their TERF. I probably should have considered that pun in advance, but now I don't even have a joke to make about it. But the point is, everyone opposes intersectionality unless they are pro-intersectionality. The feminist scholars are well aware that most women are not feminists and kind of oppose the feminist agenda, even if only latently, with the fact that they find sexist men sexy and things like this. So this new study suggests that fewer than 1 in 5 young women would call themselves a feminist in the UK and US. I imagine it's a lot smaller in the UK than it is in the US too. That might come as a surprise as feminism, the advocacy of women's rights on the ground of the equality of the sexes, has been the spotlight lately. Dude, if it stopped at the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of equality of the sexes, feminism would be fucking over. There would be nothing more for us to discuss. We would look at people's rights and say, well, we all have the same rights. Now it's up to us on how we use those rights. But no, that's not where it stops. It's an entire process of deconstruction, the idea that all hierarchy is illegitimate and therefore all of it must be somehow washed away. That's what feminism has become under intersectionality, because intersectionality views any kind of power dynamic hierarchy as illegitimate, and there is no way of legitimizing it. This is why intersectionality is just opposed to the concept of civilization as we understand it. Which is why so many people are against it. And you go, oh, look at all these authoritarian regimes. Yeah, they're authoritarian regimes, and they know exactly what is going on here. And so they just get lost. You know, get bent. You either go to jail, we'll defund you, we'll ban you, whatever. Right? We can't do that in the West. What we, as the people of the West, have to do is understand these things and personally avoid them by self-association. Basically, if you're ever given the option to do a feminist course, refuse. If you're ever given the option to work for a feminist organization, refuse. If you're ever given the option to hire a feminist, refuse. These people are no good for you. They are here to cause trouble because they view the entire governing structures of our world to be fundamentally oppressive, which is fucking ridiculous. We are the freest, most open countries that have ever existed in all of human history. I don't know what fantasy, I do know what fantasy they have in their head, but the fantasy that they have in their head has never existed and never will exist because it runs counter to the natural state of humanity. That state is forming groups with leaders. That is, unfortunately for the feminists, what humans do by biology. They all do it all over the place, all over the world, without exception. All humans form hierarchical societies. Feminists, get the fuck over it. I mean, look at this graph. Graph B is, do you think men and women should be equal? Which around 80% of people think yes. And what they're talking about there, I'm sure, is political equality. But the first one, do you consider yourself a feminist? Only like between 20 and 30% of people said yes. Because feminism is an ideology. It's a goal. It's a whole fucking movement that is... It's complicated and frankly seems to really hate men and white people and straight people and all of those groups that they don't consider to be oppressed. That doesn't mean people are against equality, at least political equality. Obviously, they're against loudmouth harpies running around shrieking how everyone else apart from them is evil if they don't agree with them. That's what people are against. But the thing is, the feminists are up against a bunch of really harmful stereotypes. Having interviewed a diverse group of German and British women for my research, I found associations for the term feminism with man-hating, lesbianism, or lack of femininity was a key factor in rejections of the label feminist. Well, why would people think that feminists hate men? I mean, men are the perennial enemies of feminism, so I guess there's that. But why would you think that that should become the stereotype of what a feminist is? And how could this image be improved? Arguably, as a society, we should do more to challenge narrowly defined expectations of how women look and act. Why? Women generally put those on themselves. Working harder to make this movement more inclusive could mean that feminism speaks to the experiences and concerns of diverse groups. What? This is just ideological bullshit. You're not addressing any of the actual concerns that are causing people to reject feminism. You seem to hate men. Address that now. You seem to think men are oppressing women. They aren't. Most women do not feel oppressed by men. Most women love fucking men, you dumbasses. Most women aren't resentful of them. And honestly, it's a good thing too. Because feminism really is one of the worst things that the Enlightenment has produced. Because, I mean, the Enlightenment, it did a lot of good things. It also did a lot of bad things, and radical feminism is one of them.